Hello everyone, this is Professor Chan from Math 1245 speaking. Today we're going to be going over section 2.8, which deals with formulas regarding distance and midpoints, and then we're going to talk about circles. Okay, so here's the thing, there's going to be a lot of formulas that you'll be asked to do. Okay, so the first one is if you have 2 points, you're going to be asked to find the distance. Okay, and your distance looks like this here. Now here's a thing to keep in mind. Okay, this distance formula may come off a little complicated, but it's actually pretty easy to remember. Okay, but let me just kind of show you right here. Okay, so I have 2 comma 13 and 2 comma 3 and 14 comma 8, and I'm being asked to find a distance, right? So the idea is if I look above right here, it's x2 minus x1 square plus y2 minus y1 square. And so kind of like with slope, um, I can label each one, right? So I can make my first one x1, y1, and my second one x2, y2. Kind of like how we calculate slope. And then, right, I'm going to use my formula. Okay, and so once I plug everything in, make sure you follow order of operations. So according to our order of operations, right, we do parentheses first. So I subtract inside. So I have 12 square plus 5 square. Okay, then I do exponents next. So this is square root of 144 plus 25, which is square root of 169. And it's equal to 13. Okay, now just be a little bit careful here. So we kind of got lucky with this one because this answer we end up having a whole number. Okay, so sometimes you're not able to take the square root. Here's the thing on the test. I technically don't care if you leave it as in radical form. You can simplify it, or you can just throw in your calculator and round to the nearest hundreds, which is 2 places after a decimal. Okay. On the midterm, I'll be very clear, but yeah, make sure you follow instructions. So in the homework, they'll say like round to the nearest hundreds, which is 2 places after a decimal. Okay, that happens. Also, remember distance is always positive, right? You can only have positive distance. You can't say the length of your table is -5 feet. Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay, so now here's the thing. If you kind of have a hard time remembering this formula, let's kind of understand what's happening right here with this formula, right? So I have 2, 3, 14, 8, okay? I'm going to do an approximation, right? So 2, 3 is like right here. And then 14, 8 is like right here. Okay? So I'm trying to find a distance between these 2 points, right? Sorry, let me redo that again. So I'm trying to find a distance between these 2 points. Okay? Now the thing to keep in mind is we're trying to find the horizontal distance along with my vertical distance. So if you think about this, what we're actually doing is we're actually doing Pythagorean theorem, right? Which is A, B, C, right? Or A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So C is equal to square root of A squared plus B squared. And I got that from C squared is equal to A squared plus B squared. So this is where all this comes from. And my A is the difference of my x's, or x2 minus x1. And my B is the difference of my y's, or y2 minus y1. So this actually, if you notice, is just an expanded version of Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so let's look at another example. Let's look at number 2 right here. Okay, so this is x1, x2, y1, x2, and y2. So just remember, you got to be a little bit careful when you take this, when you subtract, okay, your radicals. So this is x2 minus x1 square plus y2 minus y1 square. And this is going to be negative square root of 3 minus 2 square root of 3 square plus 5 square root of 6 minus square root of 6 square. So let's take a look at this. Remember when you combine radicals, so negative square root of 3 minus 2 square root of 3 is going to be negative 3 square root of 3 square. And then 5 square root of 6 minus square root of 6 will be 4 square root of 6 square. Okay? And remember when you're squaring this, what happens is you're squaring the number outside and a number inside and you multiply them together, right? So negative 3 squared is 9 times, and then square root of 3 squared is 3. And then 4 squared is 16, square root of 6 squared is 6. So I have 27 plus 96, and that is square root of 13, 123. Let me just double, yep. So yeah, 123. Okay. So you can leave it like that, you know, or you can do the following here. And type in your calculator. And you can say it's approximately 11.09. And that's it. Okay. So that is distance right there. Okay. So the next formula you're going to learn is what's called midpoint formula. And that is pretty straightforward as well, okay? So you have x1 over x2 over 2, and then y1 plus y2, 2. So your midpoint formula is a point, okay? So do be mindful about this. Distance is just a number, but midpoint is actually a coordinate, okay? And if you think about it, the definition of midpoint is essentially the point that's in between your 2 points, okay? So 6, 8, and 2, 4, okay? So if I do 6, 8, and 2, 4, let's kind of understand what's happening. If you want to find a midpoint, which will be like right here, it's half vertically and half of your distance horizontally. Okay? So where my vertical difference is, I take half of that, and where my horizontal difference is, that's half of that as well. Okay? So that's why we're dividing by 2, because we're adding my horizontal parts and then dividing by 2, and then we're adding our vertical parts and then dividing it by 2. So not very difficult, okay? So we're going to do the following. It's going to be 6 plus 2, right? Because that's my x's, divided by 2, and then 8 plus 4 divided by 2. This is 4, 6. Okay. And that makes sense because 4, 6, if you notice, is right here. And you can clearly see visually it's halfway in between those two. Okay. Let's do one more. So I have 7 halves minus 5 halves divided by 2 plus, sorry, and the next one will be 3/4 minus 11/4 divided by 2. So this is 2 over 2 divided by 2, and 8 over 4 divided by 2. So this is 1 over 2, and this is 2 over 2, which will become 1/2 comma 1. Okay. So those are our two formulas, distance and midpoint for the following. Okay. Now the main portion of 2.8 is dealing with circles. Okay. This part may seem a little random, but it's going to make more sense later on, and it'll be more useful throughout the semester for the following. Okay. So, what is the formula of a circle? A circle looks like this. It's your formula. It's x minus h, y minus k is equal to r squared. Okay. And what does this mean? Okay, so you have h comma k. That is the center of your circle. And then you have r squared, or r, which is your radius, okay? Now let's talk about what happens last time, okay? So, just do a quick recap. So you have a circle. Your radius is the distance from the middle of your point to the edge of the circle. This is called r. Okay? For the following here. And then it's in HK. Okay? Now, the thing is, if you notice, the center of your circle also is opposite of what you think it is. Okay? And if you think about it, right, a way to help you remember is think of transformations. So, remember when we did horizontal transformation, it's in parentheses, it's actually going opposite of what you think it is. Okay? So, let me do one example for you. Actually, you know what? Let's just do two examples. Okay? So, we'll do these two right there. So, in this form, my h comma k, or my center, is actually going to be -4 comma 2. So if I look at this right here, right, it's opposite of what I think it is. Okay? So I have a center at -4, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And then my radius, right, r squared is equal to 9. So if I take the square root of both sides, okay, r is equal to 3. Technically, it can be -3, but we will, radius is a distance, so you can't have a -3. So my radius is 3 here, okay? Now, let's talk about this here. When you're doing your homework, they're just going to give you multiple choice, or they'll give you a picture, so you don't have to worry about this. But on the test, or in your concept checks that you may be doing, you may have to do this by hand. So you have to draw, you actually have to sketch out your circle. So let's talk about this. How do you sketch out your circle? Here's an easy way. So you start off with the center of your circle, and your radius is 3. So if you remember, the definition of radius is the distance from the center to the edge of the circle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my center, I'm going to go up by 3, 1, 2, 3. And then to the right by 3, 1, 2, 3. And then starting again from my center, going down by 3, 1, 2, 3. And then to the left, 1, 2, 3. And then just kind of do the best you can to make your best circle here. Okay. So, and that's it. Okay. Let's do one more example, like this one right here. So this will be its opposite. So it's going to go to the right by 5 and then down by 3. So this is my center. And then My radius, my r squared is 16. So if I take the square root, r is 4. So same thing, we go up, down, left, right by 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's it right there. Okay. So that's how you graph circles, okay? And I think this should be pretty easy to pick up, okay? But if you have questions, you let me know. But yeah, figure out your radius, figure out your center, and then you draw your radius from your center. Then navigate, go up, down, left, right with the same number of steps, and then you just connect them all. Okay? So that's it for drawing circles. Okay. Now, you may run into something like this, which is completing what's called completing the squares. Okay? So, this is going to be a little bit strange, but it will actually help us later once we hit to chapter 3, because we'll be doing a similar process with this. So what is completing the square, okay? So completing the square is essentially manipulating our equation so we can make it into a perfect square. Now, if you're not familiar with this, I would suggest you kind of practice what's called factoring. So if you Google factoring, and type in perfect squares, okay, it'll explain to you what that means, okay? Make sure you know how to factor perfect squares. I'm going to kind of give you a brief demo in these problems. Make sure you do that. Now, if you're my 945 class, that's something we'll be going through quite a bit, okay? So let's take a look at the following. So I have x squared plus y squared minus 2x minus 4y minus 4 is equal to 0. Okay, so what I'm going to do, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move, if I just have the number by itself, I want to move this over, okay? Now let's think about this y. The reason is, remember the formula, right? Our formula is going to be in the form of x minus h plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. So r, remember, represents a number. So this number, we want to move that over. Okay, now this is not going to be my r squared, but I just want to get this number out of the way. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to group my x's together like this, and then my y's together like this. Okay, so we are going to do something called a perfect square. Okay, perfect square is remember a polynomial. When I factor it, it's going to be two factors are repeated twice. So for example, right, if I have x squared plus 10x plus 25, this actually factors the x plus 5 times x plus 5, or x plus 5 quantity square, right? Because if I multiply it out, I'll get x squared plus 10x plus 25. So I need to think of some number for here, such that when I add it, it'll turn into a perfect square. Okay, so the trick is you take the number next to your x or y, divide it by 2, and then square it. Okay, so I'll write this off to the side. If I do negative 2 divided by 2 and I square it, this is going to be equal to 1. Okay, the negative 4y, if I do negative 4 divided by 2 square, this will be negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is 4. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 1, and then I'm going to add 4. So it'll be 4 plus 1 plus 4. Okay, so let's understand what's happening here. I am adding 1 and I'm adding 4, right, to make these perfect squares, but I must also add 1 and 4 on the opposite side to balance it out, right? You can't just like arbitrarily add a number on one side of the equation and do nothing to the other side, because it's not going to be balanced. Okay, so what does this factor to? This factors to x minus 1 squared. Okay, And then this factors to x minus 2 squared. I can add these all up. Sorry, y minus 2 squared. I can add the rest of them up, and this becomes 9. Okay? So, now some of you guys are probably wondering, how did I get x minus 1? How did I get y minus 2? Here's a trick. You can take your middle number and divide it. Okay? Or you can take your n number and take the square root. So let me give you an example, right? Square root of 1 is 1. And then negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. Okay? Square root of 4 is 2. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Okay? Now, how do you know when it's positive or negative? You look at the middle term. Okay? It's the middle one, right? And remember, when I'm talking about middle and end, or the last one, remember, you go in order from highest degree to smallest degree, right? X squared minus 2x plus 1. X squared, x number. Okay? So my middle one, the sign dictates what my factored form will be. Okay? So then we can clearly see my center is going to be 1, 2, and my radius is going to be 3. I'm not going to draw it. Okay? You guys should know how to do that. Okay? Okay. Let's look at, well, actually, we only have 2 more problems, but let's look at some of these other ones here. Some of these can get a little tricky, so let's talk about this one right here. So once again, I'm going to move my 7 over, so this is negative 7. And then I'm going to group my x's together, and then my y will be by itself. Okay? So let's talk about what we do with the x. Now this is going to be a little confusing here. So I'm going to first pull out the 2, okay? The reason why is, okay, if you look at your formula, right, it's x plus minus h squared plus y minus k squared, okay, equals r squared. Okay, let me explain this to you. We actually don't care about the signs of h and k. It's just going to be opposite of what we think it's going to be at the end of the day. Okay. And then plus 2y squared. The 2y squared, let me explain this to you. So the 2y squared, if you notice, there's no like 7y, 5y, or whatever, right? So there's actually going to be nothing we need to do with the 2y squared. Okay. Now, let's talk about this right here. I'm going to rewrite this again. Okay. So what will my last term be? It will actually be 4. Okay, why? Because if I look inside here, I'm looking at this middle number. I'm doing 4 divided by 2, and I square it, and that becomes 4. Now, this is going to be a little confusing for some of you guys, okay? So some of you guys are like, shouldn't we add 4 to the right-hand side? No, we actually add 8, okay? Some of you guys are like, why 8? Here's the thing. If I add 4, it's inside the parentheses with a 2. So 2 times 4 is 8. So even though I'm putting the 4 inside, I'm really putting 8 on one side. So I really have to add 8 to the other side. So this is equal to 1. And then I can factor this. This is 2 times the quantity x plus 2 squared plus 2y squared is equal to 1. And that's going to be my final answer. Now, some of you guys are wondering, what will my points be here? Or sorry, what's my center? So the x, we don't even care about the outside. Remember, we still care about the inside. My x will be negative 2. Now, notice I don't have like a y minus or y plus something square. That means my y actually did not move. There's no transformation. So my y will be 0. My radius, since it's 1, r squared is 1, so r will just be 1 here. And then that will be my final answer. Okay, so let's do the very last one here. So same thing, I'm going to move the number over. I have 1/2. And I'm going to group my x's together and then group my y's together. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about this right here. What do I add to the very end? Okay. So my middle term is 1. 1 divided 2 is 2, is 1/2, and if I square it, it'll become 1/4. This one will also be 1/4 because it's the same one. So now if I add 1/4 and 1/4 on the left, I must add the same thing on the right hand side to balance it out. So I have 1/4 plus 1/4. If I add it to the right, this is 1. So let's think about this. What will this become? Remember, the trick is either take the square root of the end or divide the middle by 2. 1 divided 2 is 1/2. Square root of 1/4 is 1/2. Middle term is positive, so it'll just be y plus 1/2. And then the x's will be exactly the same. Okay? If you're having problems doing this type of factoring, please go back and practice this. Okay, Google perfect squares. Okay, you can also Google completing the squares. To be more specific, Google completing the squares through circles. Okay, it's the same, but it's the same thing. Okay, so you want to make sure you practice that. Okay, I know this might be a little bit difficult for some of you guys who haven't taken your last math class in a while. Okay, but it's an important feature to remember. So my radius is going to be just 1. Square root of 1 is 1. And then my center is going to be, remember, think opposite of what's inside. So it's negative 1/2, negative 1/2. Okay, so that's it. I hope you guys followed through this video. If you have questions, let me know. But we are completely done with chapter 2, and your midterm will be coming up very shortly. Okay, the next video will be dealing with chapter 3.